there, readers, writers, and friends. Story Serpent here, and today we are talking about The Hanging City by Charlie N. Holmberg, which is actually an adult romantasy that I am recommending for the YA audience, which, given the author, you shouldn't be surprised. It was published back in 2023 by 47 North, which is, of course, Amazon's imprint. But before we get into all that, today's random words are like, share, subscribe, buttresses. So what does this book have to say about itself? Why did I pick this thing up in the first place? I should let you know, I did this one on audiobook and then went and got a copy from the library so I could show you all. I have no idea what the structure of this book is like, how well it was printed, what it holds up to, no clue. And since the library always tapes down the dust jacket, I can't tell you anything about the cover itself, although it does have these lovely purple end papers, doesn't it? So I enjoyed the audiobook and the performance thereof, and that might have something to do with why I'm recommending it, because that was top notch. But let's see what the book has to say about itself. She doesn't just fight monsters. She is one. 7 years on the run from her abusive father and with no hope of sanctuary among the dwindling pockets of human civilization, Lark is out of options. Her only leverage is a cursed power. She can thrust fear into others, leaving all threats fleeing in terror. It's a means of survival as she searches for a place to call home. If the campfire myths of her childhood are true, Lark's sole chance for refuge could lie in Kagmar, the city of trolls, a brutal species and the sworn enemies of humanity. Valuing combat prowess, the Troll Council is intrigued. Lark could be much more useful than the low-caste humans who merely labor in Kagmar. Her gift makes her invaluable as a monster slayer to fight off the unspeakable creatures that torment the Trolls' hanging city, suspended from a bridge over an endless dark canyon. Lark will do anything to make Kagmar her home, but her new role comes with a caveat. Use her power against a troll, and she'll be killed. Her loyalty is quickly put to the test when she draws the hatred of a powerful troll who loathes humankind. Still, she finds unexpected friendship in the city, and even more surprisingly, love. But if everything else doesn't undo her, being caught in the arms of a troll surely will. Now in the fight of her life, Lark has a lot to learn. About her past, about trust and hope when all seems lost, and above all, about the extraordinary power of fear itself. So, we are promised semi-dystopian world where humanity is hanging on by a thread. We are promised a proactive main character with a valuable skill set that makes it totally reasonable that she would be able to survive in the setting she is put in. A world building that is really interesting. The idea of a hanging city suspended beneath a bridge is just fascinating to me. I'm sure there are engineers who will read this book and be like, "Nuh-uh." But it's also clear that Holmberg did her homework because she has a whole engineering department in amongst the trolls that maintain their world. We'll get to it when we talk about the world building. But we are also promised a human troll romance, which I know, it sounds a little wonky, a little weird. And there are ways in which it is. I don't know that I found it super romantically compelling. I'm not into trolls. But the way she delivers it is with such tact. There are some really, obviously there's going to be some really interesting social dynamics at play when you've got an entire species whose social structure and social caste is based on size and brutality and the skill with arms, etc. A human who is barely coming up to, rib cage height and can't do much more than scare people isn't going to be interesting to most of them. So what kind of troll would even be interested in a human like her? These are some really interesting, thought-provoking questions that I went into the book with. So what is working? As always, Holmberg's prose is on point, very readable, much more pained glass than stained glass. You know, she's not drawing a lot of attention to the prose itself, but in the few times she does, it's done really, really well. If Holmberg has a prose hang up, it's sometimes her dialogue. Her dialogue is either feels just a wee bit contrived to make the plot happen, or it's a little stilted, a little awkward. But again, I did this one on audiobook, and the audiobook reader delivered most of it so well. It was truly seamless, her reading of it, which I think did the book a lot of favors. As far as the story, what's working? Lark is a really likable character. She has legit reasons for running from place to place. We get her backstory sprinkled in over the course of the book, rather than, there's no info dumping, which is always the temptation in a fantasy. Doesn't happen. We get her story over time. It's woven in really well. And the parts of her story, her backstory, that become relevant over the course of the story show us how and why she's arcing the way that she is. It's so brilliantly done. You do need to know, if you are thinking about handing this to your YA reader, and I recommend this for older YA readers who are reading a little bit up, so like 14, 15 at the youngest probably, and if you feel like they're mature enough to handle some more intense things, great. 17, no problem. The reason I say this is trolls are a brutal society, so there's a lot of violence. There is a caste system that is set up within the troll society structure that makes absolute sense. It's not arbitrary. It's not the patriarchy. It's nothing dumb. It's just that when you are fighting for survival, you have to make sure that the fittest survive. When your species takes 2 full years to gestate a child and doesn't do it that frequently because, you know, not a lot of like maternal drive happening in a female troll, you have to make sure that everyone who is reproducing is fit and strong and building the society you have in a world where it hasn't rained properly in years. That's going to be a problem, right? So it makes sense that they have this strict caste system. In order to move up in this strict caste system, you have to beat, and I mean literally beat, with swords, with axes, there's fighting. You have to prevail over someone of a higher caste, and they give these opportunities for it every so often. It's brutal stuff. Towards the climax of the book, there is a full-scale war. It's brutal stuff. Bending people to your will with fear is an intense thing, and there's a lot of ethical is it ethical to use that ever? In self-defense, what kind of self-defense is acceptable? What's not? These are some very interesting ethical questions that come along with the world building in the book. I really didn't see anything with the story itself that I ever had a problem with, because it all made sense in the context of the story. It was well explained, it was well described. It never comes off as being put in there for shock value. And as a result, I think it could be very worthwhile to a young reader. Let's talk about the romance real quick. Obviously, human on troll amour is a little weird. I didn't love that. But in the context of the story, it makes sense. And Holmberg answers the question, what kind of troll would be into a human, really well. She develops all of her characters very well. There is some kissing, pre wedding. Troll marriage is different, obviously, but we are explained the kind of commitment that trolls would have for one another and the way that that manifests early on, relatively early on. Early enough that when it happens, it's not, what is this? This came out of nowhere. It's building towards it very well. There is... Think Fourth Twilight. There's open door, quote unquote, intimacy happening, but it's handled with tact and discretion. It's not graphic. It's told in such a way that is more about their emotional connection than it is about anything else. And it's really beautifully done. I would have no problem handing something like this to one of my daughters and being like, see, this is what you should expect. You're not marrying a troll, but this is what you should expect of the man you're marrying. So I really enjoyed the tact with which she handled it. So even though it's written for adults, and it does have some heavier adult themes throughout the book, including what do you do when you're the odd man out in a system that hates you? If you want to have a real conversation about systemic racism, put a human being in a world full of trolls and see what goes down. Great opportunities for conversation with your teen about such things. How does Lark handle being an outcast? How does Lark handle the fact that the system is literally built against her? What does she do in response to that? I don't think there was a single time where either the morality, the characterization, like, the bad guys are bad guys. Do you have any idea how refreshing it is for the bad guys to be bad guys because they're doing bad things, not just because they're a guy or they're a certain race or they expressed an opinion the author obviously disagreed with? It was a delight to see real villains behaving the way they were behaving for reasons that made sense. And as a result, at no point was I looking at the themes of this book going, ugh, another one of these. No, it was so refreshing to have a main character I was delighted to spend time with. I ignored so much laundry to finish that audiobook. You don't even know. Because I wanted to get through the story with Lark. I wanted to find out what happened to her. It was deeply engaging. So, overall, The Hanging City by Charlie and Holmberg gets a Best Beach Reads from the Story Serpent. Feel free to hand it to your teens without worry that they're going to be getting a hold of way more than they bargained for. Anyway, if you've got a story you want to see the Serpent take on, feel free to put it down in the comments. Until we meet again, read on, write on, stay sharp.